G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and this is my follow-up to the video on keeping politics out of the hobby. Do not expect a third video. There is a second video today because I want to address basically two key points. Now, what you're actually seeing on screen, by the way, for those who haven't seen this before, this is what it looks like as the person who creates a video in the background. So we get this large section with all your comments and information about the video, editing, monetization. This video is not monetized, by the way. Also get this big section held for review, and in there we find all of the comments that YouTube thought were a little bit problematic. And those particular comments, yeah, a lot of them are not problematic, and I have to go through and manually approve every single one of them if I think they are or aren't something that should be shown. I do not censor comments. I don't care for censorship. I'm happy to let people speak their mind, even when I disagree with it. I'm mature enough of a person that it's not going to cause my fees to get too hurt. But YouTube has an algorithm, and the algorithm decides what is and isn't shown, and I have to go through and manually sift through that. And there are two layers to it, because there's a little button or bar I have to click on. And it says, well, these are the ones that are really insulting. So basically, trigger warning to you if you want to view them. And usually it's where a person says a no-no word. And that can be as simple as a basic swear word. It could be a link to an external website. Even if it's completely harmless, they get isolated under a third tier of sort of naughtiness. So if you're wondering where your comments went, that's where they went. I'm not deleting your comments. I don't care. So in here, a common thread that people raise is that you brought up neo-fascists and you brought up social political views. These things are not the same. No, they're not the same. I'm sorry if you get the feeling that from what I said that they are the same. They're not the same. My point with it was that if you want to have views and you want to espouse those views and you want to represent them, do not be surprised if views which you find very offensive or on the nose or reprehensible are also shown to you, because if you think your views have the right to exist, you have to basically understand that other people's views have the right to exist. If you want to have a whole bunch of LGBTQ plus whatever iconography on your Marines, and someone else wants to have neo-fascist iconography, neither of you are in the right or the wrong there, for better or worse, unfortunately, because people are espousing their viewpoints with their miniatures that they pay their money from. You may hold certain views on their beliefs and how reprehensible they may be. I'm not going to venture an opinion one way or the other here. I'm trying to stay completely out of that. But my point is, there will be viewpoints expressed by people, and some of them are going to be pretty spicy takes that we just won't agree with. And it's just a slippery road to head down, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to say that political views are fine to share, or socio-political views, or social views, then it's going to swing in both directions. You're going to get crowds who are just completely against what you believe. That is the nature of the world, and it's the nature of the internet. And so my opinion was, don't espouse any of those beliefs and shutter yourself in from them. And people would say things like, well, sharing your LGBTQ plus painted Marines is an expression of oneself, and it's showing that there are gay people in the hobby. I have a problem with this on multiple levels. First, not showing those Marines is not the opposite. Okay? The opposite to showing those Marines would be showing straight pride Marines. Marines in the game are what you make of them behind closed doors. When I play opposite a person, I don't care what their race is, their religion, their gender, their ethnicities. I don't care about their sexuality. None of that is information that is relevant to the game that I'm trying to play with them. The game is what's important there, not the person behind it when we're having the game. Now, if we strike up a friendship and we get into those details about our particular personal lives, that might be something that does matter, but that's a personal level and it's irrelevant to the game at that point. And this goes both ways. My background, my history, all of that is irrelevant to the person who's playing across the table from me. Because what I have done and who I have slept with is not going to change the core rules and tenets of the game we are playing. And people like to bring up how the politics of 40k, and I tried to head it off. I tried to say, like, look, I understand there is politics within 40k, but those politics are different to real world politics. I tried to head it off and I failed utterly. And when I failed in that, where I failed was I didn't clarify one particular key tenet. And that is that, yes, 40k has politics, but people are not interested in talking about the politics of a game like 40k. They are interested in talking about real world politics and forcing that into 40k and then using 40k as an example of the real world when it is a fictionalized setting with a political system that is not what you think it is. It is not fascist, it's not communist, it's an amalgamation of many different authoritarian regimes. And that is the Imperium itself. And yes, I'm sure there are certain worlds within the Imperium which are, democratic utopias and such. Cool. That's not going to affect the average game that I'm playing, most likely. And where people are getting it wrong is they're taking what are real-world political scenarios and then trying to just hold a mirror up to 40k and say, well, this is a one-to-one representation of this thing in real life. And it's not that clean cut. Okay? And once you start adding in real life to it, all the rules change. Okay? You have to start looking at what the larger background is to any event, because nothing is ever black and white. I hate to break it to people. Okay? You might look at something like the French Revolution and you look at the storming of the Bastille and think, it was a place of repression and where they held down political dissenters and Louis XVI's political prisons. And then on the other hand, you might look at it and go, okay, well, what of people in the Bastille were criminals who should have been there? So was the storming of the Bastille a good thing or a bad thing, And that just one simple event that's become, idolized, Bastille Day in France, a huge thing to this day, has various degrees and what should be one of the more simple events of the French Revolution. And then, of course, they cut off Governor Delaunay's head and paraded around. But, that's neither here nor there. You can't just take political events in our real world and take events in 40k and say these two things are 100% identical. They're not. They may draw inspiration from the real world, but all of the things happening around them in the background, that is different. And because it's a fictionalized setting, 40k, the cause and effect is very, very different to the real world, where the cause and effect is complex. People spend their whole lives studying political theory and don't come out the other side with any answers, unfortunately. It's just the way it goes. But in this particular situation, I'm saying don't try and force a square peg into a round hole. If someone is rocking up to the game, they can hold whatever view about their models they're putting down on the table that they like. It does not affect me. But once they start painting them and start lecturing to one visually or verbally or whatever means they may have from across the table, that's when it becomes tiresome. Because I want to be role-playing in the universe of Warhammer and taking it, relatively seriously. It is a game at the end of the day, but taking it relatively seriously. I've decades of investment in these novels and stories and the backgrounds of all these different characters. And then a person is going to take the hobby that I want to enjoy, the way I want to enjoy it, and then completely upend that to suit their means. Now, I understand that they have a right to do so, but they've just taken away all of my rights at the same time in doing so. And that's not a great thing, is it, for anyone, to have someone else come in? And this is true of whether I'm playing opposite LGBT Marines, whether I'm playing opposite communist Marines, whether I'm playing opposite the reborn neo-fascist brotherhood or whatever, okay? I can be playing against the Grand Dragon themselves. I don't care at the end of the day. It is irrelevant to my hobbying. My hobbying is at its best when I have the inclusivity, and I do. If you look at something like my Knights Errant project, and you look at the different Marines in there, many of my Marines have bare heads because they're heroes to me. And heroic models, even though it's silly, often have bare heads in my armies because it's a great way of picking out who the characters are. And they're all of different ethnicities, those people. But I don't need to make a big song and dance about it. I added it because I felt it was a great way of representing the different people from the different legions that have come in and joined this particular fighting force. That to me was a great way to do representation, and it's subtle. And I know it's there, and someone might come on with the army and go, oh, I noticed that, there are people who are Caucasians and people who have darker skin tones in there. Oh, I see, you've got different ethnicities. And it's fine, it's subtle, it's there. Someone might notice it, but I don't need to shout it from the rooftops. And that's when it works best, when it's just treated as an everyday occurrence. Well, I spent a decade of my life nearly in the military, and I know this is irrelevant to the hobby itself, but in there, it did not matter where you came from, what your background was, what your beliefs were. We all made friends and we all had each other's back when the times got rough. And I wish more of society was like that. I didn't need to be lectured to about a person's gender or their race or anything like that. Nobody cared at the end of the day, because the big picture to us was what happens if you go into a combat zone. Which of these people are going to be the ones that protect you? And the people that protect you and have your back and look after you, the people that you share, your greatest pains with, that you talk to from the heart, that you cry to in your moment of desperation, those people, it doesn't matter where they came from, okay? They became your friends through shared circumstance. There was no need to have representation or special patches or anything like that. You just knew, okay? You developed those relationships with people. And vice versa, as I said yesterday. We would be the most... If you listened on the outside to any soldiers talking to one another, you would think it was the most hateful, bigoted conversation you've ever seen in your life. To see a couple of old soldiers talking to one another. The amount of shade that gets thrown is truly beyond belief. But none of it is meant to actually insult. It's a game of one-upmanship where you're trying to get the other person to crack first and laugh, basically, at the absurdity of what you're saying. And we all did it. And it is one of those great icebreakers where nothing was too sacred. The only thing that is off limits was jokes about basically kids being abused. That was it. Okay? And they think that dark sense of humour, by the way, has something to do with the First World War, that people developed it as a coping mechanism. And I could see that very much being a thing that was brought back from the trenches and infiltrated into society as a whole, and especially the military stayed there. That's just a side note. But to stick to the topic at hand, if you want to have representation and paint your Marines however you like, go for gold. Doesn't matter to me. Okay? But what I don't need is a lecture on how my beliefs that I'm not sharing at the time are wrong because somehow I'm not an ally or supporting whatever cause and whoever's cause. Socio-political, it does not matter. The setting has its own politics within it. I don't need to have the models represent me. I don't need them to represent my politics. I can play green space orcs and have a perfectly fun time despite having pretty much zero in common with a space orc. I can play Tyranids, I can play Tau, I can play Sisters of Battle, Sisters of Silence. In fact, I'm working on a Sisters of Silence Knight Errant combined project in the background, trying to do something interesting with those factions. It's all irrelevant at the end of the day to the real world. And the more the real world seeps into the hobby, the less that you're enjoying that universe and the more it drags you back to this one and all the problems that exist in this one. And frankly, it does not interest me. Now, as I said at the start of this video, do not expect a part 3 to this. Do not expect me to be taking political stances or anything like that. The whole point is I don't want a political stance to be taken. Also, the thumbnail. A few people say, hey, these certain flags line up on the thumbnail. Yeah, it's coincidence. Sorry. I just had red following on from red. I actually stacked the thumbnail vertically. It just happened to line up horizontally because when I dragged the flag across, I was trying to cover the symbol of a certain flag partially, and it just lined up in a certain way. If that's worked out coincidentally to form a certain interesting symbolism to some, cool, I'm happy for you, but that was not my intent when I created it. It's just a thumbnail. Anyway, back with the other circle. Thank you for watching, and if you want to represent your stuff and paint it however you like, go for gold. But just remember, whilst you have a right to share it, others have a right to dislike it. And they're not wrong for holding their opinions, even if some of their opinions are reprehensible. You can try and change people, but you cannot force people to change. Take care and look after one another. Don't insult one another. Treat each other as you would treat close, beloved family. Be good humans. See you next time.